Hi, I'm Paul Perdue, and I am the infrastructure nerd.
And I'm Mary Jo Boyd, a legal technologist.
You know, version 19 is coming out. In fact, by the time people watch this, it may already be out.
And you know what? I hear there's a lot of really good new features.
There are, and I'm a little worried about being able to get through them all in 10 or 15 minutes.
Oh, can you try?
I will. Okay, so version 19. What we're going to do today is we're going to take a quick run through of the what's new list for version 19. And we're not going to get into much detail. The detail will have to follow. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you that if you go here, tabs3.com/support/v19.1/v19wn.pdf, right there. That's what you need to go to in order to get this list. Now, it may be more prominent on their site by the time this gets published, but as of right now, when it's being recorded, it's still in a pre-release state. So you kind of got to know the secret pathway to get there. And I can't tell you when it's going to be out of pre-release, so I can't tell you if any other way will get you there, but I know that this way will. Now, I'm going to go ahead and skip right through the highlights because we're going straight to the meat. In tabs, we have a new font face. Now, this is true across all the programs. So we have fonts and icons that don't scream 80s. And we have a font that is more readable and bigger, okay? So that's huge for all of you who got big monitors at some point after you got Tabs or PracticeMaster years ago and realized that the fonts didn't get bigger on your bigger monitor. This is gonna solve that, okay? Much more easy to read, much more easy on the eyes as far as the icons go, and the fonts are gonna be bigger. Huge change. We have new theme settings, and so you'll see those here, meaning we now have a quick launch bar. We now have all the things that you would have put on your main tab are going to show under what we call pinned actions. We now have the ability to search for things like, let's say that I want a recap of hours. And I can do that right here. Once I click it, it becomes something that also shows up in the recap and recent actions, and I can pin it. Meaning it'll go up here to always be available, not just something that goes away after I haven't used it in a while. While we're here, I might as well show you, this is our new recap of hours. We still have the old one if you like the old report, but this one's much more graphically oriented. It's available for day, week, or month. You can scroll through the time period once you've selected it. You can still click on a day and see exactly what you got going on that day. And you can still add a fee from here. You can still add a fee from here, and now you can also add a fee right from here. So that's our new recap of hours. I'll have to remember to skip that when we get to it in the list. With the new theme settings also includes the ability to change back to the old way. So if you don't like the new theme settings, you can go into View, Theme Settings, switch to Classic Theme. I'm not going to do it right now. It'll go back to the same way it used to be in version 18. We also have a new online payments feature. For those of you that are using ProPay, we can now add a payment URL to your emails that are going out with your statements. This is only available for emailed statements. And that URL will be a click here to pay this bill. It will put the user into a situation where it knows exactly, the online payment mechanism knows exactly which bills to be paid, how much it is, basically just prompts them for their information. Then it pulls that information into tabs. So if you knew it, there has been an online payment feature for a while. It couldn't have been embedded into an email. It wasn't specific to an invoice, but it was a place where people could go and at least say, I want to pay this much money against this bill, and it would just let them type in the number of the statement. Now it takes them there automatically, knows how much they owe, and it will pull it in to tabs using the new notification badge on the icon for pulling those payments in. Will even tell you that, in this example, there are 18 payments waiting to be pulled into tabs. And you just pull them in and it creates the payment entries automatically for you. Very cool new feature. These are the payments waiting to come in, and we just import them and the payments are created. We can now apply payments to multiple matters on an invoice level. We've always been able to take a payment and hit a button and apply it across multiple matters, but you couldn't go down specifically to a certain invoice for whatever matters you were paying. You could say put $100 on this matter, $100 on that matter, but if that matter had 4 invoices, you couldn't say which of the invoices you wanted that $100 to apply to. Now you can. This one's huge for people that are coming from Juris, because Juris has always been able to do this, and people that come from Juris want to do this. Really, a lot of people want to do this. You got fees on a certain day for a certain timekeeper that don't make sense. Or maybe they're different timekeepers, they just don't make sense the order they come out in. For instance, at the top for that day, it might say that somebody attended a meeting to get the clients to sign their will documents. And then further down on the same day, it says, there's an entry for preparing will documents. Well, obviously, the preparing of the will documents happened first. So the new feature will allow you to reorder those fees within that day so that they appear in an order that makes logical sense. If you've ever tried to print, let's say, an accounts receivable summary for sorted by primary timekeeper with just the totals for everybody, you'll know that in prior versions, prior to 19, you would get a total line for a timekeeper, and then it would go to the next page and you'd get a total line for the next timekeeper, and it'd go to the next page. We now have a checkbox on all the reports so that it can be told not to start each sort on a new page. It's actually an option to do so, but unchecking it will keep that from happening so you can get a nice, concise report if all you're doing is printing totals for primary timekeepers and you don't want 40 different pages for 40 different primary timekeepers. Credit transactions. We've had the ability to credit time and fees and amounts and hours for a long time. But if we would create a negative 1 hour entry, and let's pretend the hourly rate is $250 for Bob, and then another fee entry to give that hour to George, the client would end up owing the $250. Their balance when they paid would be 0. But if you looked at the detail of how that was done, you'd see a negative for Bob and a positive for George that equals 0. We call these, we attorney computer systems, or Mary Jo and I call these negative positive zeros. In other words, there's something funky in the background, but it comes out as 0, so the end result is all right. Well, now the way that they handle those credit transactions has been improved to automatically do the reallocation in the background. So you don't get those negatives and positives. You still get the 0, obviously, when the client's paid the bill, but the allocation is proper in the background. We added the ability to print an amount, or a header, I should say, for the amount column. I don't know if you ever noticed it, but you've got, hours and rate and amount are columns in a bill. And the hours column, I believe, says hours at the top as kind of header, and the rate column says, I believe, rate at the top as a header, but there's no header for the amount column. And now there is. So now that word amount will appear, and if you want to take it out, you can just modify statement customization. We've added the ability to use the client notes field in the statement designer. It's a very long field, and there have been people for a while now that have wanted to put very long matter-specific stuff at the top of the bill. Now you can access the client notes field in the statement designer and achieve that. There have been significant speed improvements in certain situations in update statements. And I know this to be true because I sit with the two billing technicians at one of our clients that I go to quite frequently, and that was something they were commenting on the other day, how fast that is now. If you've ever noticed the entry lists that appear at the bottom of, let's say tabs when you're editing a list of fee transactions, for instance, if I go into tabs and edit a fee transaction, there are lists at the bottom. And if you have something in here that's longer than 50 characters, only the first 50 characters used to display in this field. It's not true anymore. You would go into it and you'd say, well, that's wrong. That's cut off. I hope that's not cut off in the transaction. You'd pull it up and it was fine up here, but down in the list it was cut off. That's been changed. It will show the whole description, or at least as much as will fit in the list. So that was fixed. The T code for fee and cost entry now defaults to whatever you had last. And same thing for payments. So it used to be that it would just default to the lowest number. And so people would set them up that way, and then they'd change it, and they'd forget that they wanted to keep changing it. Now it defaults to whatever was last used. Just like timekeeper. If you change the timekeeper when you're earning fees, it'll continue to default to that timekeeper you selected until you change it. Now that same applies to the T codes for costs and fees, and the regular payment T code for payments. Again, transaction lookup windows now show more than 50 characters. Same thing I described up here, just a different place. You can now define the default for client fund application in the customization so that every new matter that you open will have whatever you want as the default for application of client funds. There can be manual, there can be automatic. It used to default everything to manual. So if you really wanted automatic, you had to remember to go in and save that. Now you can set that up as a default. You can now write up and down fees and costs for all matters for a client at the same time. You used to have to go in and do it matter by matter, even if you wanted to do it across the client. Now you can simply say, hey, I want to write up or down all fees and costs for all matters for this client. Pre-bill tracking, that's that handy little thing that allows you to see what bills you've printed and which ones you've gotten back and updated and finalized, and which ones you're still waiting on, which ones you're holding this month. That used to be something that only one person could be in at a time. It is now multi-user. So if George is in it and Sylvia's in it, Paul can still get in it as well. Okay. The timer now includes a confirmation message that when you reset it, that confirms that you want to do that. Recap of hours. We have that new graphical recap of hours that I showed you. We do still have the old one, but we have this new one that can really, we find that attorneys tend to like this new one a lot more because it's graphically oriented and they like graphically oriented. We added the ability to include allocation amounts for each rule in the fee compensation rules report. Not a big deal unless you've ever run into it. You can now create journal records from multiple emails to PracticeMaster and only answer the prompt once. So it used to be you could be in Outlook and you could mark a whole bunch of emails and hit the journal button to journal those emails to PracticeMaster. And it would still ask you for each email which client it goes to. Now you have the ability to create all records silently. In other words, just use whatever I specify here and apply it to all records. So you don't have to do it for each individual email that you've marked in a group. We now have restricted fields in PracticeMaster, meaning that we can take fields and say, these fields are restricted, and the only people that can change these fields are people that have permission to change restricted fields in this file, in file maintenance or in access profiles. So you can say only certain people can change certain fields in PracticeMaster. It's a feature in the file definition. We now have 450 fields that can be added in addition to protected fields. It used to be 435, and that used to include protected fields. We've streamlined the assembly process by eliminating the show assembly option. So what that means is that it goes faster if you're not watching it when you're doing Word document assembly in PracticeMaster. We use, when accessing all other files, file maintenance, import data workflows, it always defaults to the last file. So when you're selecting a file, like you're doing a data import into PracticeMaster, it used to make you reselect that file over and over and over again. Now it defaults to the last file that was used. We talked about the graphical recap of hours when we were talking about tabs. The form designer font can now be specified, and its size can be specified in PracticeMaster. So you can change the font in your forms, in your screens, I should say. We call them forms. And you can change the size. Couldn't do that before. So now you have the ability to make your forms have much bigger text than you used to be able to have. We have a new statement of cash flows report. It used to be the only way you could do this was kind of outside of GL by simply putting some numbers together. You had the numbers, you could get the numbers, but now we have a statement of cash flows report that shows you what your cash position is as opposed to your income position, which takes into account perhaps items that haven't been paid, but they're still being expensed, but they have not yet, the checks have not yet been written, or payments that have come in but have not been applied. Basically, it gives you a cash position as opposed to an income position at any given point in time. We have an advanced client cost report, and this goes along with our ability now in GL to identify an account as the account that client costs go to. This causes a couple things to happen that I'm just going to talk about right now, even though we're not at that point in the What's New list. It means that we can now have a report that helps us reconcile costs in Tabs against costs that we are suspending in GL, because now Tabs knows where we're putting those and can help us find any discrepancies. It also means that when we're entering checks, if the check has posted to a GL account that's not identified as the one where client costs are being kept, then it doesn't ask you anymore what client to put it on, because it knows that it's not a client cost. So all these three things come together in the ability now to designate the client cost account in GL and have the report that helps you to reconcile. Account setup, this is the same thing. This is being able to designate that account. We can now designate a vendor as inactive. So for those of you that have thousands of vendors, yet only a couple hundred of them are currently active, you can get rid of that long list. And of course, then we've added the ability to exclude those inactive vendors from the vendor lookup window. And we've also added the ability to designate a bank account as inactive in accounts payable. And here's a biggie. We've added a feature, a new transaction type called EFT. Gone are the days of pretending that you're using a manual check that you then have to come up with some sort of a check number for. When you're entering an EFT type transaction, you simply designate it as being EFT. And of course, that means that we now post checks and EFTs, not just checks. And of course, that means we can void posted checks and EFTs, not just posted checks. When you print checks now, we have something that shows you the amount to pay for all the checks you've selected. So if you've got 100 checks that are waiting to be printed, but you're only going to print 5, you'll be able to see a number at the bottom that shows you how much that is. And wait for it, spell check and cost entries. We've always had spell check and fee entries. I don't know why it took so long to get spell check and cost entries, but it's there now. Okay, we've added the tabs section of the reports, these reports, to include the transaction code number, the transaction type, and the payment status, so that you can now see this information when you're trying to reconcile. Really, it's intended for reconciling costs advanced against the GL account, but there's so many other reasons that you'd want to have this information in these reports. We changed the import invoices function to not be exclusive. It's something that people can only do one at a time, but it's not exclusive to the whole program. You don't have to have everybody out of the program. Now I have the ability to configure the software to only display the Tabs3 cost entry window after saving an invoice if the GLS account is the cost account, the cost advanced account. We talked about that. That's when you're writing checks. If you're not posting that check to the cost account in GL, then it's not going to ask you what client's bill to put it on. We added support for the state payer ID in box 17 on the 1099 miscellaneous forms. We only know that Wisconsin requires this, but we're guessing that soon other states will. In the trust accounting software, just like in fees, we've added the ability to see more than 50 characters in those lists. We've added the ability to make the bank account inactive, just like in AP, and we've added the support for the state payer ID in box 17 on 1099s, just like we did in GL or AP. I guess AP. We improved the help about window so that you can get to the current working directory just by clicking a button. This really is for support when they've got you on the phone and they say, hey, can you go to your current working directory? And then they have to tell you how to get there. This is going to make it easier for them. We have taken the data and put it in a new database folder, which allows you to apply permissions to that folder and allows that data to be kept in a separate place so it's not mixed in with the program, so people don't get in there and accidentally delete a data file. And if you're using Platinum, we can mark that directory as one that people can't even see, because the Platinum server software is the only thing that needs to see it. So that's just an organizational thing, but it also provides a certain level of security, keeping people out of places they shouldn't be. We've made a few changes to the data file integrity check. We added the state ID field, which we talked about up there with the 1099s. The Tabs3 Connect software, that online add-on to Tabs3 and PracticeMaster, now has the same graphical recap of hours report that we have in PracticeMaster and Tabs. So now attorneys can see that report when they're out of the office as well, as long as they have access to Tabs3 Connect. Well, there you have it, version 19, and I think I may have even done it in 15 minutes.
And that's just one more way that we can help you to worry less
and practice more.